righty, so Father, I just thank you so much for this study today as we finish up the chart on the bowls and look at some other information that we're going to come across with some of the words that we've researched. And Lord, it is a lot, but Father, this book is a lot. This revelation is absolutely amazing, and truthfully, Father, it's really beyond man. The fact that you gave it to us is amazing in the first place, but you're always faithful to reveal yourself. And so, Lord, I just ask that you would reveal yourself to us today through this study. I just pray for those who are not here for whatever reason and ask you to bless them where they are. And I thank you, Lord, for this opportunity once again to come together and study what your word has to say. I praise you and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Well, always something new. That's all I can say. Always something new. But Rhonda and I now have, I think we have weekly conversations, maybe a couple of times a week, it seems like, talking about all the things that are going on and things that we've studied, and it's been great. I really, really love that.
Pretty awesome.
But is that, did she say something? Did
Yes,
you?
I said pretty awesome.
It is pretty awesome. It is. And one of the things that I realized, or I've been praying about, and God just really brought to my, yay, that's okay. We're just worried about you. I've got a lesson 5 there and chapter 7 there. So anyway, so one of the things that I realized is that, in the past when I've taught Revelation, there hasn't been a whole lot of drama. It's just been really interesting and everybody gets to throw out their ideas and whatever. But things have changed and there's a whole lot more variety of opinions and people and things on YouTube and just all kinds of things that are coming out. And I just, as I was praying about it, I just realized, we just really need to be humble about what we're looking at with Revelation, because we don't know the answers. We have our ideas. There are some things that for sure we can say, 3.5 years, 3.5 years, we can say that. We can say that there are certain persons and certain events that are going to happen. But we all have we're not talking about the kind of study that is although part 1, I think, is personal application all over the place, right? But once we get past chapter 4, or really chapter 4 and 5, once we get past that, although there is personal application in aspects of what we're talking about, we're looking at just straight up prophecy, right? Events and things that are going to be happening. So I don't want to ever appear that like I think I've got all the answers, because I definitely do not feel that way. I do not feel that way. But I also want us to feel that whatever we come across, whatever we read, and Rhonda and I talked with her for a while about something she sent me that I thought was amazing. It's an amazing video, and I'm going to really pray about it for those who want to receive it. I've got to really pray about it before I send it out, because it is not something for a casual reader of the Bible. I'm just going to tell you about that. So now everybody's curious, they want to know what it is. But it just really astounded me to think we are going to have a lot of things thrown at us, a lot of opinions, a lot of prophets, a lot of prophecy, a lot of things are going to start happening, because one thing that I do feel for sure is that the time is short. It is short. And as I talked about last week, a woman in New York making application for a marriage license to marry her own son. When you start seeing things like that, we're pretty close. Pretty close. So I just, as we go forward, and we're gonna talk about things, and especially when we get into part 3 and 4, when we start really doing cross references, and that will be very revealing. That will help us to kind of center things a little bit more and get a little bit more foundation on what we're looking at. But part 2 is meant to be a survey. We're at the end, we're going to talk about a few things that are not going to really come up again, but for the most part is gathering information and making sure we've got it in the right place, so that when we go to the next parts and we look at the cross references, we're not having to go back and figure out, well, where does this fit? Right? That's really what we're doing in part 2. So you just want to kind of review. We have the 7 seals, and we know that the 7th seal is the first trumpet. And so these seals, this understanding of when the seals start, there are 2 views. One of them is that the seals may not start at the beginning. They might start before the rapture, before the beginning of the 7 years, last 7 years. I am personally do not think that the seals start before that. And I'm just gonna say this, I've really been thinking about this first horse. The first horse is most likely the Antichrist. Now, I watched a video from somebody else who said it was just a spirit. But I think they're crazy. Anyway,
Could you say that again?
the first horse is most likely the Antichrist. Now, that doesn't mean that the Antichrist only comes on the scene at the first seal. But what it does mean is at the first seal, he is given authority to start the events that happen. I believe that if we're truly, let's say we just throw out 10 years. If in the next 10 years, the Lord should return, I think the Antichrist is on the earth today, okay? If it's 100 years from now, no, he's not there. He'd be a very old, weird looking man by the time that happened. But I'm just saying that based on, let's just say we are in the birth pangs, and the birth pangs might be 10 years, or might be 100 years, we don't know. I'm just gonna use 10 years as an arbitrary number. That guy's on the scene. But the authority that he receives with his crown and his bow and his white horse, to conquer without firing a shot. That's what it means. He has no weapon. He just has a bow, no arrow. He's going to go and conquer. He has to be on the scene today. He has to be some kind of personality somewhere. And we just don't know who he is if we're using that time frame.
Kathy.
Yes.
Okay, so if you look at the description,
Yes.
of the horse and its rider, if you think about it, there's really nothing about that description to make him outstanding.
Right. That is a very good point. But he will be outstanding when he starts conquering. That's what I'm getting at.
Right. But what I'm saying is, going in line with what you're saying, that he's probably already on the earth.
Right.
Whenever these things are set in motion, there would be nothing yet to notice to make us think, oh, wait.
That's right. I agree with that 100%. I do agree with that. That's right. So we're just going to remember that here is the white horse. He is given a crown and a bow, and it's given authority to conquer. Then we have the red horse, which takes peace from the earth. The consequence of the white horse is going to be war. People are going to stand up and say, no, we're not doing that. There's going to be wars. And these are affecting men on the earth, and it's affecting the entire earth. Then comes the black horse, which is about famine. But not everything is going to be destroyed. Not everything is going to, it's not going to be completely everything. The wheat, the oil and the wine are still going to exist. And we'll talk about that probably later. Then we have the ashen horse. The result of that is death. This is the entire earth. A fourth of the earth dies by the sword, famine, pestilence, and wild beasts. Okay. Then we have the souls under the altar, and this is them crying out, how long? Now, I had a question from someone saying, does do people in heaven have a concept of time? And I went back and I really started pondering this statement. And I don't think that the question is how many more things. I think the question that they're asking is how much more sin will you allow? I think it's more in terms of that, how high will the sins reach to heaven? So I don't think that those slain under the altar are saying, is it going to be 6 months from now? Is it going to be a year? They're just saying, how much more sin will you tolerate before you take vengeance? Then we have the great earthquake. The whole moon turns to blood, stars fell to the earth, the sky split like a scroll. Some people think that's a picture of a nuclear bomb. Don't have any idea about that. I'm just saying that's one of the many different things that people say. Every island and mountain moved out of its place, and that is affecting the entire earth. And here's the deal. I'm just going to say, maybe it's a nuclear bomb, but if it was a nuclear bomb that was moving every island and mountain out of its place, there would be no life. Okay, so whatever it is, whatever that is, we don't know, but it does affect the entire earth. So we see a progression. Men are being dealt with first. We see a question. This is a very unusual seal right here. This is very unusual. It's not like anything else that's talking about there has to be a completed number, going to rest until that happens. This is interesting. And then we have a great earthquake that affects the entire earth. Then the seventh seal opens up the trumpets. And then we see a third of the trees, the earth, and all the green grass, a third of the sea, a third of the creatures, a third of the ships. We have a third of the rivers, the springs, and a great star from heaven falls. Many die from poison. Then we have the sun, moon, and stars struck so that they were dark a third of the day and the night. This is affecting the earth. This affects men. This affects the earth. Okay, that's how that's working. And then we have the three woes. So 9:1 is where we see the fifth trumpet. The star that falls to the earth is a king, right? And the first woe is locusts on the earth with power to harm men. We see that there's a comment here, 8:13, 3 more trumpets, 3 woes. That's what this is talking about. Then we have the second woe. There's 4 angels that are prepared for this. Then we see the king, Apollyon, and Abaddon, which are words for Satan, okay? And we see a third of men die. So we have a fourth of men here, a third of men here. That's quite a lot. Killed by fire, smoke, and brimstone. And then we see the first time where it says men refuse to repent, 9:20 through 21. We see also the great day of wrath has come in 6:17. So I think that this is talking about what's starting to happen here in the trumpets, but we know that wrath is found in 7 bowls, okay? So there's some other things that we can fill in, and on my chart, I have things that have been filled in here, and you guys can look at my chart if you need to, that's totally fine. So now we're going to talk about the first bowl. So where do we see that found? Where is that in 16:2? Okay, 16:2, thank you. So this first bowl, and isn't it interesting? Let me just go back and say in chapter 15, what happens in chapter 15? I just want to get up there to 15 real quick. What happens here? There's a sign in heaven. Now, I just want to point out to you, the first sign was the woman in chapter 12. Then there was the dragon. And now we see another sign in heaven in chapter 15. And it's great and marvelous. And I was listening to a preacher that was talking about how the use of words have changed, like wonder and marvelous and things like that don't have the same connotation or meaning that they do in scripture. In our current society, we use the word awesome, like those are awesome shoes. Well, in scripture, awesome is this incredible picture of God, great and awesome and mighty and powerful. These are really amazing words. And I think sometimes because we're so desensitized to words, that, another sign in heaven, great and marvelous. This is a big deal, right? The 7 angels who had 7 plagues, which are the last, because in them the wrath of God is finished. So this is a very important statement. In these 7 trumpets, the wrath is done. The wrath is finished. I'm sorry, this is a terrible way to do this board, but okay, whatever. That's all we can do. So in them, the wrath of God is finished. And so then we see this incredible picture of the throne and the temple. The tabernacle in verse 5 is open. The 7 angels came out, clothed in linen, clean and bright, and girded around their chest with golden sashes. They are marvelous to behold, right? Then one of the 4 living creatures gave to the 7 angels 7 golden bowls full of wrath of God, who lives forever and ever. Now, another thing that someone else that I looked at talked a little bit about these 4 living creatures, that they are there regarding things of the earth, that they deal with things regarding the earth. And every time you see a living creature, it is doing something regarding a consequence to earth, which I thought was really interesting. It's just an aside thing. It's not, it's not gospel. It's just an interesting thought. So the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no one was able to enter the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were finished. So the important thing about chapter 15 is that this is it. Nobody's going in, nobody's coming out until this is done. So that I think is a very important little segue about what's happening. So in 16:2, well, verse 1 says, go and pour out on the earth the 7 bowls of the wrath of God. So the first one in 16:2 is what? What happens? 16 or 1-6.
Loathsome and malignant sores on the people.
Okay, who's it on?
And it was the mark of the beast.
Yeah. So there are loathsome and malignant sores on those of the mark of the beast who worshipped his image.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty specific, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens in the next verse?
Second angel, 4-12.
Okay, so 16:3 is the what? What happens in this one?
The sea becomes blood.
I'm sorry, what, see?
The sea becomes blood.
Yep. The sea is blood,
Everything in it dies.
all life dies. But it says something very interesting about this blood. What kind of blood is it?
Like that of a dead man.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, one of the words that we do want to talk about here, if we can get to it, is blood. We're going to talk about what we learned about blood. The next one is 16:4. What happens there?
The seas and the rivers became blood.
And what did we learn about this blood? Verses 5 through 7, what do they tell us?
They deserve it.
Whose blood is it?
The
The
blood
saints over the altar.
Okay, well, it's the blood of the saints.
and prophets.
From how long ago do you think that is from?
From the beginning.
From the beginning. That's something to think about. What is God doing there?
This is.
What was the question?
What is God doing here? What, think about how this is different from what we've seen before. You know, we see this one, see, this is one of the great things about these charts, they're so helpful. We start to see famine, then we see poison, right? Then we see the whole, all the, you know, there's a progression of each one of these things. And so the third of the rivers, the third of the springs, wormwood, water, many die, poison, and then we see the entire sea, the rivers, all blood. And it is the blood of the saints and the prophets. And what does the angel say about them, about why it's on the earth?
They're due.
Because he says they deserve it. Wow. So the men on the earth, men deserve it. How has this changed? I just want us to think about this. How has God's behavior changed? Is God the same yesterday, today, and forever?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what does this tell us about how God has felt about everything from Cain and Abel, not including Adam and Eve here, from Cain and Abel up until this point?
Nothing has changed about the way he feels.
Exactly. So what does that say about God's patience?
Yeah.
Beyond measure.
What were you saying on the somebody on the computer? On Facebook was saying stuff, I mean on Zoom? No. I think that is one of the most profound statements. When you really look at the breadth of this, how big this is, how much 2/3 of the earth are water, right? The land mass is only 1/3. How deep is the ocean? The entire ocean, all the water is blood. And it's the blood of the saints and prophets. So something I have to ask myself is, what am I stressing about? How limited is my vision of God? And how much more does this help me to have an expanded vision of what God is doing and why we really should not be stressing too much about this stuff? Because he is giving, he is just. And I just want to tell you guys, I had a funeral I went to this last Tuesday. It's one of the saddest funerals I have ever been to. It was Unitarian. And I just couldn't believe it. My client, she's a very sweet person. My dad used to go to that church. And I love her. She's a wonderful person. She's a very good person as far as she has a good heart. She loves people, blah, 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 all that. But she's Unitarian. Now, she personally believes in heaven, but no hell. That priest, the woman came up and I had no idea, had no expectations, never been anything like this. The woman came up and she said, "We're going to light a candle for Daniel." And so they light the candle for Daniel, and she says, "We want to do this as a memorial to him." Okay. And then she said, "We don't know where we came from. and we don't know where we're going. But we want to take a few moments to meditate on wherever Daniel is and hope that he is in the place he wanted to be. I was like, what?
I went to one yesterday that was the exact opposite of that. You know exactly where he is now.
I just
This is-
thought, no hope,
Yeah.
no hope. I'm like, why do you have this religion? It's all about whatever you think is right, that's the right thing.
That's what I was gonna say, the people that have taken that belief on, they're okay with it.
Yeah, it's okay that you think that way. And I left, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what we're looking at. We're looking at people who absolutely reject God and are getting exactly what God says they deserve. And he is not going to relent. And he may give time, he may give direction, he may do a lot of things, but he's not relenting on his judgment. And how sad it is that it has to come to that. Those people are gonna find that out. Yes.
When I read they deserve it, I thought, that is so harsh. And a lot of people don't want to see God as being harsh. He's all, he loves us so much. To the very end, he will love us, and there will not be this, this punishment. But they deserve it. That is.
So when we go into part 3, we're gonna see why he does that, because we're gonna look at what they deserve. And one of the things that I know about myself, and I know about every believer, is we are saved because God saved us, not because we're good. And we are not destined for this, not because we don't deserve it, but because God has covered us with his righteousness. And so it's with humility that we should look at these things, not with,
God has a right to say this.
Exactly,
God has the right to say this.
right. Exactly. He is saying they deserve it. And what else says it? This is very interesting. And verse 7 says, I heard what?
The altar.
Altar say, yes, O Lord God, the Almighty, true and righteous are your judgments. Now, what altar are they talking about?
Would that not be the altar, but that the souls are under?
I would say it's the soul of the altar.
I was thinking earlier that this is where they're calling out to be avenged, and this is their blood that is avenging them.
Yeah, that's a really good, I think that is a very good analogy. They're calling to be avenged. This is the blood, their blood that's being avenged. But of course, it's all the saints. It's all the saints who have died, okay? So yeah, this is the altar calling that out, saying, true and righteous are your judgments. Wow. Okay, then we get to the 4th angel. And what is this one?
Where's it out on the sun?
Okay, so it's the sun, and what does the sun do?
Scorches men with fire.
And it's with intense, fierce heat, right? What happens when this intense, fierce heat happens? What do men do?
They blaspheme the name of God.
They refuse to repent, right? 16:9, refuse and blaspheme.
See, it reminds me of Pharaoh. He had an opportunity to repent, but he continued to harden his heart against God. Then it
Right.
got to where, okay, now God was the one who was hardening his heart. And
Right.
it reminds me of that with what's going on here.
Yeah, is God trying to harden their heart or get their attention?
Get their attention.
Get their attention, yeah.
Of course, at this point, I'm just gonna say,
Too late now.
it's too late for them now, right? because they're not gonna be able to be turned back. They have the mark. Anybody who has the mark is not going to be, they have made their decision, basically. So that's men blaspheme God. And then we have what happens in 16:10.
It's poured out on the beast.
Okay, so the bowl on the throne of the beast. And what happens?
His kingdom became darkened.
Darkened kingdom. And what does it cause?
Gnawing of tongues.
Yeah, incredible pain that caused them to gnaw their tongues. I'm sorry, this is so low. I hope you guys can read it online. Wow. That is pretty powerful. What's the response to that?
They did
They
not
did right
repent.
Yep. 16:9, 16:10. Okay.
What does that say, Kathy?
Did not repent, 16:10.
Okay. Yep.
All right. So then we see 16:12. This is the sixth bowl. Now, I'm gonna tell you that these bowls towards the end here are gonna correlate with some other things we'll see later on. We're not gonna talk too much about it, but we do want to pay attention to these bowls. So in 16:12, it's very interesting. What happens in this one? What is this bowl judgment?
They're drying up the Euphrates to prepare for for Armageddon.
Okay, they dry the Euphrates. I'm not gonna write it out. Just dry the Euphrates up and it makes it like a highway, right? And it is a prep for war. And what else happens?
3 unclean frogs.
Okay, and then he sees this vision. Now, this is not the bowl. This is the results of the bowl, okay? He says, because out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits like frogs. For they are spirits of demons performing signs which go out to the kings of the whole world to gather them together for the war of the great city, for the day of God the Almighty. And then he says, I'm coming like a thief. Blessed is one who stays awake and keeps his clothes. They will not walk about naked, and men will not see his shame. And they gather them together to the place which in Hebrew is called Armageddon or Armageddon. So these 3 spirits are empowering the kings of the earth to go to Armageddon, okay? And this is the prepping for the war. And so there's 3 spirits coming from the beast, the dragon, and the false prophet to prep them. And then we have 16, 17, and I'll just kind of draw this right here. This is what?
Poured
The
out upon the air.
up on the air. Now, why do you think that?
Because that encircles the entire globe.
It does, doesn't it? This is a wrath on the air. And what is it about? Poured out these, verse 17, and a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne saying, it is done. So this is the last one. I'm gonna put it right here. It is done. This is it. It's over, right? What is so interesting about this is what do men do? I'm gonna go back to it, but it's 16:21, what does it say?
Do not repent.
Men did not
Mhm.
repent. Men did not repent. This happens in the 7th bowl. So we see a loud voice from heaven, right? Saying it's done. They came out of the temple from the throne. Who do you think is talking there? Whose voice is that? From the throne, out of the temple.
When it says it's done,
Who do you
that's
think?
God.
That's God. Or Jesus, but I think it's, okay. And there were flashes of lightning and sounds and peals of thunder. There was a great earthquake, and such as there had not been since man came to be on the earth. And we're gonna talk about this great city in just a second, but how big is this earthquake? Now remember, we've been talking about earthquakes. Here's this earthquake, right? And we notice the earthquakes are in the last bowls, last seal, last trumpet, last bowl, or the 6th, in the 6th or 7th. And we see this was a pretty big earthquake, right? We see other earthquakes that occur. I don't have written down for whatever reason. And then we have this incredible earthquake at the end.
Mhm.
Never seen one like it.
Mhm.
Something to think about.
Well, that one, they were just all moved out of place. This earthquake, the islands and mountains were gone.
Yep, it says, if there was a great earthquake, such as there had not been since man came to be upon the earth. So great an earthquake was it, and so mighty, the great city was split into 3 parts. They're talking about Babylon there, by the way. And the cities of the nations fell. Babylon the Great was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce wrath. Every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. And the huge hailstones, about 100 pounds each, came down from heaven upon men, and men blasphemed God because of the plagues of the hail, because the plague was extremely severe.
Have completion of judgment in these bowls.
Yeah. But yet, what's going to happen in this 7th, we're going to really kind of talk about it in chapter 19, but this is setting up something, which is going to be the great battle of Armageddon. So I'm gonna throw out something here, only because I have the whiteboard and the dry erasers. So in the beginning, in Genesis, there was one, we're just gonna make it one landmass. I'm just putting up lines. This is before, this is in the beginning, during Adam and Eve. And then there was a division after the Tower of Babel, right? God divided up and made all of these different lands. And if you look at the tectonic plates of the earth, you know, you've got all this here, and then you have land over here,
Mhm.
right here, and stuff down here. Okay, I think what's happening is God is moving it all back. That's just my opinion. This is just according to me, okay? I just think God is just taking it all and he's making it all one landmass. Now, something important, one of the other reasons why I believe this, and you know, I have to make sure it's just clearly me saying it, is over here in the middle of the world is Israel.
Mhm.
We often wonder, how do all these people, first of all, get to in the millennium reign, how do they get there?
Mhm.
You know, we're gonna build bridges and roads and stuff across from all these other, no, it's all gonna be one landmass. How are all the kings of the earth gonna get to the battlefield? Right, one landmass. I really think that that is what,
Well, in Isaiah, he says he'll turn the seas into roads.
right,
Right.
so I'm just saying, that's what I think is going on here. Now, do men understand that? I have no idea. I mean, we're not there. But I think that's what's happening. That's what God is doing. He's moving things back. And then we're gonna have a change completely. We'll look at that in part 3 or 4, where we look at how God changes the temple. You know, the temple of God comes down on the earth, that's in part 4. And the Jerusalem is up on a mountain, and then everything around it's a great plain. I mean, he is completely rearranging the earth. That's what he's doing. So. So we have men refuse to repent. These chapters right here are talking about the arrogance of men. And we see through all of this part right here that men refuse. This is men rejecting men are refusing God. That's what all these chapters are really talking about. Each time something happens, and it just really shows us how much God is right in his judgments of mankind. Is there anything else that we want to talk about regarding this that we need to put in there that we saw? We see the men did not repent up here. In this part, there's 9/11, that birthday, yeah. Men, let's see, the king over them was Abaddon. Then we see men did not repent in 9/20. That start this, and this is the last. This is the 7th or the 6th trumpet, the second woe. That's when we start seeing that men summarily reject God. Okay. Yes.
So you said about God bringing the land masses together. That makes total sense to me, because we know, and it's been a question, there's a role for all of the nations, even into the future,
Right.
in relation to Jerusalem, the temple. But that totally makes sense to me, I just see the logic of that and what's going to be happening in the future beyond these things when the New Jerusalem comes down.
Right, and one of the things about it too is that we see something very important about when God created the Garden of Eden and he told men to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. They would not have had boats. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
There's also going to be something else in the garden that we are going to see.
I'm just saying, I don't see any mass transit to other continents going on. So,
I got to Google this now, because many times we've had conversations about, well, where do we see the U.S. in end time prophecy? Like, I got to Google that and see where that might fit.
right? Okay, so now let's talk about some of these other words that we looked at. We have a chart here. I'm looking for all the places where I saw certain words. And one of the words that was very interesting to me was the word blood. So what is it that we learned? It was in, I'm gonna just write down some of the verses, 5:9, 6:10 through 12. And 7:14, 12:11, 16, 17, 18. What is it about blood? and how it's used in the book of Revelation. What do we learn about it in chapter 5?
It's the blood that purchased men for God.
And it's, whose blood is it?
Christ. Jesus.
So it's Jesus's blood. There's something about this, and I just want us to really think about it, because we see blood talked about here, right? Blood here, blood here. Where else was blood? Blood right here. Okay. This blood purchased men for God, and it was Jesus's blood. 6:10 through 12 tells us something very straightforward. What does that tell us about the blood?
It's the blood of the saints and the prophets.
Okay, it's the blood of the saints and
Prophets.
prophets. And what does it say God is doing? God is avenging it.
Mhm.
How do these two verses connect to each other?
Because in a way, he's still purchasing blood.
He purchased the blood through the sacrifice of Jesus.
Right.
Are we set apart because of that? We have a blood
Yes.
transfusion. We have a
Yeah.
we have blood, right?
As believers are set apart.
We're set apart.
And it's the blood of Jesus.
And so God is avenging the blood of his own because we are now spiritually the blood of Christ in us.
Right.
Okay? 7:14 says that, what did men do? Washed their robes
And
in the blood of the Lamb. I'm trying to put two words together. I do that on my typewriter, but I can't do it. Or on my computer, can't do it on the board. Wash the robes in the blood of the Lamb, because these are men of the tribulation and they were made white. You know, we can just spend time only talking about this one word. I think it's so important. We see in 8, 7, and 8 that blood now comes down, right?
mixed with fire and hail.
Right, blood
How terrifying is that?
with fire and hail from the earth. And we see blood comes down to the earth in 1/3, right? And then we see 12:11. What happens in that chapter?
Satan being thrown down and going off to wage war with the saints.
Okay, so in 12:11, the saints overcame how?
By the
The
blood of
blood
the
of-
Lamb.
The word of their testimony.
And then in 16, we looked at the blood on the sea, the water, the whole earth, right? In 16, we see that now blood on the whole earth. And then we see 17:6. What happens in this one? What do we see in chapter 17?
See the woman drunk with the blood of the saints.
Okay,
and of the witnesses.
and then we see one more, 18:24. It's in the woman, in her is found the blood of the saints. In the woman. Let me just ask you. Is it only special saints or is it all the saints? All.
Who have been slain on the earth.
All who've been slain on the earth, so all the saints. Now, the woman, we're gonna be talking about her, is Mystery Babylon.
Is one.
Mystery Babylon. Okay? What are we learning? What connections can we make about the blood? When did we first see? Now, it's not in your homework. I'm just, everybody in here should know the Bible well enough to answer this question. When is the first time we see blood shed in the Bible?
Cain killed them.
Cain killed Abel. Well, before that,
Was in the garden.
in the garden, what happened?
God killed an animal.
The garden.
Adam and Eve.
Okay, Genesis 3, like 24 or something like that. I think that's, I can't remember exactly, but it's the end of Genesis where God shed blood for Adam's sin. And we know that they understood that the consequence of sin is to cover that, is to shed blood. So what is God teaching us about the shedding of blood?
It's required for atonement.
Required for atonement. Why? What is it 5:9 tells us? What happened in 5:9?
Jesus atoned for our sins, the
Yeah.
sins of the world.
Okay, and that is for every sin, right? So it says that God is going to avenge their blood. When did he start avenging their blood?
Well, no, it would have been since the beginning.
From the beginning, he's been doing this. But you see, because God is just, he holds that blood for vengeance upon those who refuse to repent. This is a sobering and powerful thought. To think about how serious God is about sin.
Whenever he shed blood in the garden for Adam and Eve, he also made coverings for them. So we see that he shed blood and he made a covering for them.
Exactly. And in every case, if you follow that word, blood and the cross and God and Jesus, you would see a very consistent pattern of how God feels about sin and what must be done to be found righteous. Right? So when we think about the altar, this is one of the reasons why I think the altar is saying not how long will it take you, but how much will you take before you judge, is because of this very specific concept of how God views the consequence of those who destroy his people, right? There's only two paths. There's heaven and there's hell. There's God, you follow God, or you're following the devil. You're the God of this world or the God of heaven and earth, right? It's only two. If you simplify it down to that, it's very easy to see how God is judging and why he's judging and what gives him the right to do that. Because he made this covenant and he avenges and he purchases men with his own blood. I don't know, I just think that's pretty
Yeah,
It's very thought-provoking, something that we don't really look at too much, but I think we should think about it more than what we do.
Kind of expands the meaning of the woman being drunk with the blood of the saints and the prophets, because
Yes.
this has been going on since creation.
Yes, that's what I wanted to get at, and thank you for reminding me of that, because the woman is Babylon. And I'm just gonna point out something here about Babylon. Babylon is found in Genesis 10. Nimrod goes to make the Tower of Babel. God confuses the language, divides the people up, divides the land masses even, to make sure that they separate from one another. Babylon is the only city that has existed from Genesis to Revelation.
They were barely out of the garden and we see Babylon.
Right. Babel or Babylon is the absolute first organized false religion. It's found in Genesis with Nimrod. He organized a systematic false religion and tried to build a tower to defeat God. That's what he deceived the people into thinking they could do. So do we see a life from Genesis to Revelation? We see a single battle really going on here. It's the Antichrist or Satan against God. And it really is throughout time that that's going on. So the woman, being Babylon, is only doing what she's done from the beginning of time, which is to bring in a false religion to cause men to blaspheme God and stand against him. That's one of the reasons why understanding that word blood in scripture is so important, because it's the basis for what God's going to judge. This is what he says. He's going to purchase, he's going to judge because of the blood that's been shed, because it shows the sin of the enemy and his right to judge them. Okay. And the only other word I want to kind of look at and talk about a little bit is wrath. So I'm going to erase this. Ron and I were talking about numbers and systems and consistency this morning in scripture. And, you know, God, if he is the same yesterday, today, and forever, he is consistent in everything that he does. And he has a system, a systematic way that he deals with things. And that's why all of us, I am guilty of trying to take things out of context to make it prove my point. And that is why I can't do that. So,
Oh, say it ain't so, Cathy.
my goodness, what do we learn about wrath? We saw it in chapter 6, verse 16. What did men do there?
if we're to hide from the wrath of God,
Okay, so men cried, hide me from God's wrath. Why didn't they understand? You know, they just bowed the knee right there. But no,
Because they knew they weren't gonna survive, and that's what's so crazy.
I know it. Why are we so resistant to bowing the knee?
Stubbornness,
pride.
pride.
And what is our pride? I mean, if we really think about pride, what is pride?
So,
Okay, I am my own God. It's a God. Pride is a God. So if I make God in my image, I'm not very willing to give that up because it suits all my needs, right? Makes me always correct, it gives me everything that I need, except when God's wrath comes upon me. And yet, what does pride do to men? What is the problem with men and pride? It
destroys them and
Well, I guess
blinds them.
it goes before the destruction.
It goes before destruction, it blinds us. Pride is very blinding. Have you ever tried to talk to somebody who's very prideful?
Yes.
How's it go?
You can't tell them anything. You can't tell them it goes their way, only their way.
And what is it that they're willing to do to uphold their pride? Just about anything. They're gonna ignore anything that interferes with that.
My dad had this saying that if you ask him, well, who said that? 3 guys I know, me, myself, and I.
But I've been around a couple of people recently that there's so many theories about what's, and particularly with our government, and
Right.
what's going on. And well, they did this and they said this but I have found what's common in both of them is these different groups, all they have to do is throw in a Bible verse. And it's automatically believable. And you can say, well, that was taken out of context. No, it wasn't. Are you a Bible scholar? Do you know that?
Wow.
Context, who knows what context is?
Yeah, who knows exactly.
Wow. That is, golly, that's,
I forgot.
I would just say that's biblical.
oh yeah,
That's okay.
that's
One verse out of the
One verse.
okay. The next one is 11:18. What happens in chapter 11:18?
We have the 2 witnesses.
Okay. What does verse 18 talk about? I'm gonna put
Well,
my,
it's
go ahead.
Nations were enraged against God's wrath.
because you've taken your great power and you've begun to reign, and the nations were enraged in your wrath came.
Right. So I'm sorry, I'm out of the camera. I apologize. So what do we learn about the wrath in 18? The time of judgment for the dead. So this wrath that came is to judge. Wrath is judgment. That's all we're getting at. Right? When it comes from God. What's the contrast? 12:12. Judge, this is God. This is God's wrath.
Well, in 12, you're seeing the wrath of the devil, the dragon.
The dragon's wrath. And what do we know about this wrath? This wrath that the
He only has
dragon
a
has.
short
Short-lived.
But it is wrath, right? So what is the contrast here of these two?
One is everlasting and one is temporary.
One is everlasting and one is temporary. That's excellent. And God's wrath that comes is for judgment. What is the devil's wrath? Why is it coming?
Well, he doesn't have the power he thought he did.
It's the last straw.
It's the last of it.
It is based in pride. That's what it's really based in. I want to be God. That's what he's saying. So, just like blood is a very important word to understand in Revelation, how important is it to understand this wrath? Let's talk about wrath for today, how we understand what God is doing today with wrath. We're gonna talk about the rest of the wrath verses, but I just want us to, men cry, hide me from God's wrath. God says his wrath is coming because he's judging sin. But the dragon's wrath is short-lived. It's pride because he is in opposition to God's right to judge. Right? His wrath is a response to God's right to judge. Anything else that we could see about wrath? How about chapter 14, verses 10 and verse 19? It really explains what God's wrath is. God's wrath is the full cup of his anger.
That's for anyone that worships the beast
Okay, for anyone
or has his mark.
who worships beast or has the mark. Remember we talked about Genesis? What was Cain's problem?
That
With
his,
Abel?
Jealousy.
his sacrifice was not accepted.
What did God say? Why has your countenance fallen? If you do good, right, will I not receive your offering? So Cain marched right over to Abel with the intent, I guess, to get a lamb. Got so mad about it, he killed his brother. We went from eating a piece of fruit to the next sin is killing somebody. Right? Adam and Eve ate a piece of fruit. The next sin that's recorded is Cain and Abel. That is the intensity and the deceptiveness and the infection of the disease of pride and wrath and what it does and how it destroys us.
Well, actually, they both came from an improper view of God.
Thank you. I was about to go there and you beat me to it, dang it. For men, it is an improper view of God. Why do we have to have the 70th week? Why do we have to have the tribulation? Why must it happen?
It's final ditch effort for salvation for some.
It is, and what does it say about God? He has a time limit, he has a limit. This is gonna go so far. And has his limit been long? Yeah.
Yes, it has. But he even told the saints under the altar.
Yeah.
A while longer.
Yeah.
Until the numbers are reached.
Until the numbers have been complete. But his wrath is just. His wrath is the full cup of his anger. It is for anyone who worships the beast or takes the mark. It is a wrath against an improper view of God. And in 19, we know 15 and 16, the bowls of wrath coming out, but in 1915, we see Jesus strikes with wrath. And he is just in doing it. My goodness, this is so sobering, isn't it? What is it? Well, and I didn't even talk about 19, when Jesus avenged the blood of his bondservants on that. I'll just put that 19, 2 through 13, I'm gonna put there. It's really under blood, but it is God avenging the blood of his bondservants on the harlot. So we're gonna see, this is really what is gonna be at the heart of everything else that we're gonna be looking at as we get to the next parts of Revelation. We have does this help us put things in context, where things are, what's in there, what's not in there? We're gonna move on and look at some other things related to this, but when we start looking at these words, these are all words, and like the woman, we didn't even talk about her. We will talk about in lesson 5, the 2 women. We're going to do a little bit of a chart, a list about those 2 women, Babylon and the woman of chapter 12. But these are all things that we're using to get a solid foundation of what's in the book, what's being talked about, and where it's being talked about, and so that when we start adding in information, we'll start to see more clearly. It makes it much easier for us to understand the cross-references. They'll make more sense to us because they have a context in which we are functioning. And by the way, the best chart maker in the staying room is Marta Knight right there. If you looked at her charts, it's disgusting how good they are. Here, give me that chart so I can show the camera.
And there's the second page.
Look at this, to the people in the camera. Look at this chart, look at that. It's revolting.
That's handwritten.
Here's this other one, she's working on the words.
It's on front and back.
Front and back on the words, look at this. Here's the back.
Impressive.
Hey, get her email. Make her scan that stuff and send it to you.
Please send that out.
I mean, I have stuff written everywhere. I mean, I got it in there. I don't know how I did it. And I thought to myself the whole time I was writing this thing should have been like this big.
I was gonna say, she writes, well, I have to write the bigger, put on
So-
another page.
Okay, so is there any questions or any commentary that we want to make before we close? It went so long last week. So, any observations? Just remember that the rest of the things, the nations, Babylon, the saints, all of these other things are really gonna kind of fall under the blood and the wrath, really. It does kind of fall under those 2 main.
When I was doing this chart, especially when I was looking at blood, we only looked at blood in Revelation.
That's right.
We didn't even scratch the surface of
That's right.
blood all the way from the Old Testament
That's right.
through the New Testament. And I thought, if you were doing a search for blood all the way through that, you would have an encyclopedia by the time you were done, because there's so much reference to the atonement of the blood and the blood
Right.
sacrifice.
And it's central to understanding prophecy. That's the thing. It's so missed that is such an important thing to understand. Yes.
So wasn't blood was also used for the covenants.
Yes.
And between men, they would clasp their hands and mingle their blood to
Right.
seal a promise or seal a covenant.
Right.
That's where we got the term cut a deal.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah. Because when we think about the condition of Adam and Eve before they fell, and then the consequence of that all the way through, blood and the shedding of blood represents the remission of sin or the wrath of the dragon. Kind of in those two
Also,
categories.
there is no life without blood.
That's right.
Blood gives life.
That's right. And you know, the concept of that had to be divinely taught to man. We didn't have the science that we do now to understand that if you cut yourself and you bleed to death, you're gonna die. That is a covenant language taught by God in Genesis chapter 3.
Well, life was so essential that any time a man was put to death, whether it was by a person or an animal, he required that person's blood.
That's right.
So it's always been a picture of the importance. And she talked about covenant. That's exactly what I was thinking too. With covenant, you always have the shedding of blood. So anyway, it's really been a picture he's painted for us from the very beginning.
From the very beginning. So it says, before the foundation, God knew us, right? He knew his son was coming before the foundation. What else did he know before the foundation? Right?
He knew how it was gonna end.
He knew how it was going to end. We live on this earth and he does the things that he does for our good, not because he doesn't know what he's doing, but he gives us time to repent. That's it, isn't it? Pretty much. It's pretty much it. So over the next few weeks, we're getting close. I guess you guys are going to be so ready for a summer break. You're going to be like, get me out of that class. So, but I am going to try to order part 3 books before we finish this class, for the reason that you can have it for the summer to work on. Part 3 can be overwhelming if you get the precept upon precept. Rhonda, have you done the in and out version of Revelation part 3?
I have not done the in and out version of anything because the very first class that I took, I was so disappointed that my workbook didn't look like yours. I have to get with the program and get the whole thing.
So I don't know what it looks like. I'll try to get online and see what it looks like. If it covers enough, get the easy version, but there's going to be a lot of cross-referencing of scripture. There's going to be a lot of cross-referencing. But I'd like you to have it before you leave, before you finish this, so that over the summer, unless you're a person who's inclined to lose your book, let me know. But that'll give you time, and keep your observation worksheets and use the observation worksheets that you have now. Just transfer them over. You'll have more notes to put in part 3. Okay. I mean, that's how I do it. I mean, I have multiple sets of Revelation because I've taught it multiple times, and I'll go back through, but with the different observation worksheet. But that's because I'm teaching it, and I feel like I need to make sure I'm thinking things through. Okay, well, I can't believe it, 5 minutes early, it's a miracle. And if you don't have anything else, let's pray. So Father, I just thank you so much for that you have not executed your wrath in my life when I just can think of a gazillion times I deserved it. So thankful for your son. And it says that you've purchased from every tribe, tongue, people, and nation, men with your blood. And you purchased us. And we just want to worship you and in humility honor you and seek you in all that you're doing in our lives. And I just pray for this country. I pray for our friends that are not saved, our family members who do not know you, that Lord, you would be able, you're able, but we would be able to hear clearly enough and speak faithfully your truth with the hope and prayer that those we love will get saved. I just thank you, Father, and I praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. You can go ahead and stop the recording. I just want to also